Papa, come. Please come now. She's bleeding. She jumped in front of me, Papa. She saved me. That was the phone call Vincenzo Rinaldi received at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning. The call that stopped the most dangerous man in the city, cold in the middle of a meeting, made him drop everything and sent six armed men sprinting toward a dance academy on the north side. But in that lobby, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was a woman lying on a cold tile floor, one hand pressed to her bleeding side, and the other hand still holding a terrified little girl's. She didn't even know whose child she had just died for. If that already hit you somewhere deep, subscribe right now and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story reaches. She almost didn't take the job. That was the thing Natalie Voss would come back to later, lying in a hospital bed with machines counting her heartbeats for her. The fact that she had held Madame Corinne's phone number in her hand for 3 days before calling it back. 3 days of staring at it. 3 days of telling herself she didn't need the work, she was fine, she was managing. She was not fine. She was not managing. She was 34 years old, 14 months out from a car crash that had ended a 12-year career as a professional ballet dancer. Living in an apartment that felt like a holding room between the life she used to have and whatever came next. She had savings that were disappearing faster than she'd planned, a left knee that ached every morning when she got out of bed, and a very specific kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by the thing you love most in the world, dance, and knowing you will never fully belong to it again. She called Madame Corinne back on a Thursday night. She started at the Corinne Academy of Performing Arts the following Monday. She told herself it was temporary. The academy was exactly the kind of place Natalie had grown up wanting to attend and never been able to afford. Marble floors, high ceilings, the faint permanent smell of rosin and expensive perfume, students whose parents drove cars that cost more than most people's houses, a waiting list 18 months long, and at the center of it all, Madame Corinne herself, 63, silver-haired, impeccably precise, in the way of someone who had spent a lifetime making everything around her perform on cue. She had been a celebrated dancer in Paris in her 30s. Now she ran the academy with the iron composure of a woman who had decided very deliberately that she would never be at anyone's mercy again. She had interviewed Natalie for 45 minutes, eyes moving over her the way a jeweler examines a stone looking for flaws, calculating value. At the end, she had said without warmth, "You have good instincts. Your technique is broken, but your instincts are intact. That is rarer. You'll do? Not welcome aboard. Not we're glad to have you. Just you'll do." Natalie had thanked her and meant it anyway. The students were good. The work was real. And for the first time in over a year, Natalie found herself getting through entire mornings without thinking about what she had lost. That was the state of things on the morning Sophia arrived. Corinne called Natalie into her office at 9:20 minutes before the first class. She was standing at her desk, not sitting, which Natalie had learned meant the conversation was going to be brief and not entirely comfortable. "You have a new student joining intermediate today," she said without preamble. "Her name is Sophia, 7 years old. Some prior training, private instruction, but uneven. Her guardian has requested our most attentive instructor." She paused. "I am assigning her to you." Of course, Natalie waited. With Corinne, there was always a second layer. "Is there anything specific I should know about her?" Something passed across Corinne's face fast, like a shadow moving across still water. "She is a quiet child, private. Do not ask too many questions." Another pause, this one carrying a weight Natalie couldn't quite name. "And Miss Voss, her guardian, is a very important man, a very private man. Discretion is not optional here. It is a condition of your employment." Natalie held the woman's gaze. "I understand." "Good." Corinne looked back down at her desk. "That will be all." Sophia arrived at 10 o'clock. She came in with a woman who was not her mother. Natalie knew that immediately, not from logic but from something instinctive, some reading of the body language between them. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, dark-eyed, dressed in a plain gray jacket, with her hands loose at her sides. She scanned the lobby with the quick, practiced eye of someone whose job was to notice what other people missed. The little girl at her side was small for her age, with dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail and serious brown eyes that moved across the room with a calm, watchful intelligence that felt distinctly adult. She was wearing brand new dance slippers. The price sticker was still on the left sole. Natalie went to them. "Hi, I'm Natalie. I'll be your instructor." The woman gave a short nod and stepped back. Natalie crouched to the child's level. "What's your name?" "Sophia." Quiet, careful, measuring her. "Have you danced before, Sophia?" "Yes." "Did you like it?" A pause, not uncertainty, Natalie realized, but consideration. The child was actually thinking about the question. "Then, yes, it's the only time I feel like I can just be somewhere." Natalie looked at her for a moment. 7 years old, she thought. Who taught her to feel like that? She held out her hand. "Then let's go dance." After a moment, Sophia took it. Bam. The next 11 days were a slow unfolding, and not just of Sophia's technique. The girl was extraordinary in the way that quiet children sometimes are, not explosive, not showy, but deep. She absorbed correction instantly. She practiced the same movement 40 times without complaint, adjusting fractionally each time until she had it. She had the focus of someone twice her age and the stillness of someone who had learned early that the world moved faster than was comfortable. But she also, once she decided she trusted you, talked. On the third day, she told Natalie that she didn't like loud places because they made it hard to think. On the fifth day, she said out of nowhere that she used to have a mother, but she didn't anymore. And she said it with a matter-of-fact steadiness that was somehow more heartbreaking than tears would have been. On the seventh day, she said, "My papa watches videos of me practicing. He can't always come, but he watches the videos." "That's sweet," Natalie said. "He has a lot of responsibilities." "I'm sure he does. Important ones." Sophia said it simply without boasting. A statement of fact the way you'd say the sky is blue. "Sometimes I don't see him for a few days, but he always comes back." She paused. "He always comes back." Natalie heard something in that repetition, a child reassuring herself. She changed the subject gently and didn't ask further. Corinne had said, "Do not ask too many questions." She didn't, but she listened, and she watched. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture assembled itself in the edges of her understanding, one she wasn't yet ready to look at directly. On the ninth day, something happened that she filed away and tried to forget. A man came to pick Sophia up. Not the usual woman, a different one. Older, broad, dark coat despite it being a mild afternoon. He stood outside the front window of the academy for 3 minutes before the door opened. Natalie saw him through the glass, and what she noticed was that he wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the street, looking at the cars parked along the curb, looking at the people walking past, looking for something or someone. Paula behind the desk had noticed too. Natalie caught her clicking her pen, rapid, anxious, and when their eyes met, Paula looked away first. Sophia went out calmly, took the man's hand, and didn't look back. Natalie told herself it was nothing. Security, maybe? Lots of wealthy families hired security for their children. It was a sign of the times. Well, she almost convinced herself. No, don't. The Tuesday started like any other. Cold, bright November light. A half-drunk cup of coffee on the corner of her desk. The intermediate class 9 girls between 6 and 8 moving through their bar exercises with varying degrees of commitment and grace. Sophia at the far end, quiet and precise, her eyes on herself in the mirror with an expression of total concentration. Natalie moved along the line, correcting a turned-in foot, here a dropped elbow, there offering encouragement in a low voice so as not to break the room's focus. At 10:30, she dismissed the class. The others left in the usual tide, mothers, nannies, the occasional driver waiting with an umbrella already open. In 3 minutes, the lobby was almost empty. Sophia was on the bench by the cubbies, her dance bag on her lap, waiting. "Marco late again?" Natalie asked. "3 minutes probably." Sophia said it with the resignation of someone reporting reliable weather patterns. "He stops for coffee. He thinks I don't know." Smart man, bad timing." Sophia almost smiled. Natalie went to the front desk to sign off the attendance log. Paula had gone to lunch. The lobby was quiet, the particular quiet of a building, after a rush of small bodies, has moved through it and gone a silence with texture and warmth still in it. "Natalie, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why don't you dance anymore the real way? On a stage?" The question landed simply, cleanly, the way only a child's questions can, straight through every defense without even knowing they exist. Natalie set down her pen. "I hurt my knee in an accident. I can't do the things I used to. Does it make you sad? A long pause. Yes, she said, most days. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then I watch you when you're teaching. The way you move when you show us something, even just walking across the room, it's still beautiful. I think you're still a dancer. You just do it differently now. Well, Natalie's throat tightened. You taught me that, actually, Sophia said, that things don't stop being what they are just because they change. 7 years old, Natalie thought again. She turned to look at her, this small, serious child on the bench with her dance bag on her lap, and her brand new slippers and her ancient eyes, and something moved in her chest, something warm and painful and entirely unexpected. She opened her mouth to say something. The front door opened. The man was wrong. That was Natalie's first thought, not dangerous, not threatening, just wrong. Wrong the way a piece of music is wrong, when one note is just slightly off pitch. You can't always name it immediately, but your body hears it before your brain does. He was broad-shouldered, dark coat, moving fast but controlled the walk of someone who knew exactly where they were going and had decided to get there quickly. His eyes swept the lobby. They stopped on Sophia, and in Natalie's chest, something went cold. Can I help you? She stepped forward, putting herself between him and the bench without making a conscious decision to do it. He looked at her, a flick of assessment, dismissal, and then his gaze went back to Sophia. His hand moved to his coat. Hey. Natalie's voice came out sharp and hard, harder than she knew she had. I said, can I help you? He reached inside his coat. And Natalie Voss, who was a dance teacher with a bad knee and a half-signed attendance sheet, who had no training, no weapon, no plan, looked at Sophia's face. Those enormous brown eyes, wide with a terror that told Natalie this child knew exactly what kind of danger this was. A child who had spent her whole life being told he always comes back. A child who right now needed someone to stay. Natalie moved. 3 steps. That was all it was. 3 steps across a lobby she had walked 100 times past the cubbies, past the bench, and she put her body in front of Sophia's. The sound was enormous. Wrong for an indoor space, a crack that seemed to compress the air, to ring off every hard surface at once. Something hit her left side with a force that was not like anything she had ever felt. A catastrophic wrongness that was heat and cold at the same time that erased her breath in one instant and left something else in its place, a pressure deep and total that her body did not have a framework for. She hit the floor. The tile was cold against her cheek. She could hear Sophia screaming. She could hear other sounds, the door voices running, but they were far away, muffled like sounds heard through water. What was close was Sophia's voice, ragged and broken, and Sophia's hands small and warm and shaking, gripping her arm. Natalie, Natalie, open your eyes, please. I'm here. Her own voice came from somewhere distant. I'm right here. You're bleeding. Look at me. Natalie tried to focus. The light was wrong, too bright, flickering at the edges. Sophia, look at me. Are you hurt? No, I'm Natalie, please. Good. She felt something trying to pull her under, heavy, warm, relentless. She fought it. You're okay, that's what matters. You're okay. Don't close your eyes, Natalie, please, don't close your eyes. She heard Sophia fumbling with something. A phone, numbers dialed with shaking hands. And then a voice, not crying, not screaming, but stripped raw, every careful composure gone, a 7-year-old girl reduced to the oldest, most essential sentence in the world. Papa, come, please come now. She's hurt. She jumped in front of me. She saved me. Papa, please. Natalie let her eyes close. Not because she had given up, because she knew with the last clear thought she had that help was coming. She had made sure of it. She had given Sophia enough time that she thought as the world went white and quiet, that is enough. That is enough for one life to have done. The machines in room 412 would disagree with her later. But that was later. She woke up to white walls, mechanical beeping, and Paula's hand crushing hers with the grip of someone who had been holding on for a very long time. She's fine, Paula said immediately before Natalie could form the word. Sophia is fine. Not a scratch. The bullet went through your left side muscle and tissue, nothing critical, you lost blood. But Natalie, you are going to be okay. Natalie exhaled, long and slow and complete. Where is she? Sorry, outside. Paula's voice shifted, careful now, something layered underneath. Natalie, her guardian is outside. Good, she should be with him. He's been outside this room for 4 hours. Natalie looked at her. Him, Paula said quietly, and 6 other men. She glanced at the door. The nurses have stopped coming in unless someone calls them. A pause. Do you know who Vincenzo Rinaldi is? The name settled over the room like a weather change. Natalie did not know the name, and she did not know it. It was the kind of name that existed in the peripheral vision of ordinary life, the kind you heard in fragments and lowered voices that you never asked about directly because some instinct told you the answer would change things. Tell me, she said. But before Paula could answer, the door opened. Slam. He walked in alone. No guards, no performance. He simply came through the door and crossed the room with a quiet, absolute authority that had nothing to do with size or noise. It was the authority of someone who had never in his life had to announce himself. Mid-40s, dark suit immaculate, dark hair with gray at the temples that he had not bothered to hide. A face that had been through things, not a pretty face, but a true one. Strong bones, lines at the corners of his eyes that came from something other than laughter, and dark eyes that settled on Natalie with an expression she had no immediate language for, something that contained, she thought, both relief and a kind of pain, and under all of it, something that looked almost like wonder. Paula stood up, murmured something, and evaporated. He stopped at a careful distance from the bed. He looked at her for a moment that stretched past comfortable into something else entirely. Then he said, "You didn't know." It wasn't a question. "Know what?" Natalie said. "Who she was, who I am, what you were stepping into." He said it with a precision that suggested he had been thinking about this for 4 hours. "You had no idea." "I had no idea," she agreed. "Does that matter?" Something moved through him, quick, internal, like a tremor that never reached the surface. "To me," he said, "it is the only thing that matters." He stepped forward, then, just slightly. "My name is Vincenzo Rinaldi." "I know," she said. "Paula told me." "Then you know what that means." "I'm starting to." He held her gaze. "Miss Voss, I have lived my entire adult life in a world where no one does anything without a reason, without calculation, without an angle." He paused, and for a moment, just a moment, the careful precision cracked, and what came through was simply a father. "You threw yourself in front of my daughter. You didn't know her guardian. You didn't know her name. You didn't know anything except that she was frightened." His voice was low and absolutely steady. "I do not know how to account for that. I have been trying for 4 hours and I cannot account for it." Natalie was quiet for a moment. "She was just a scared little kid," she finally said. "I know. I would have done it for anyone. I know that too." He looked at her, that strange, searching look. "That is precisely why I cannot account for it." A knock. Soft, impatient, unmistakably 7 years old. The door opened a crack. "Papa, you said 5 minutes." Sophia's voice from the point clipped, and absolutely not going to wait any longer. "It has been 14 minutes, I counted." Vincenzo's face changed. It was the smallest thing, a fractional softening at the edges, a release of something held very tight, but it transformed him so completely that for a second Natalie felt like she was seeing a different person entirely. "Come in, Maya Piccola," he said. The door swung open, and Sophia came across the room at speed, not running because she was controlling herself, but moving with the urgency of a child who had been told to wait past the limit of her endurance. She stopped at the side of the bed and looked at Natalie with those enormous dark eyes, full and glittering. "You closed your eyes," she said. Her voice was steady, but her chin was doing something complicated. "I know, I'm sorry. I told you not to. I know, I'm sorry." Natalie held out her hand. "I'm awake now." Sophia looked at the hand, then at Natalie's face. Then carefully, like someone handling something she was afraid of breaking, she took it in both of hers and held it the way she had in the lobby, tight, deliberate, as if the grip itself was a decision. "I told Papa what you said," she whispered, "about still being a dancer." "What did he say?" Sophia glanced up at Vincenzo, who was standing at the foot of the bed with his hands clasped behind his back, watching them both with an expression of careful neutrality that was working extremely hard at its job. "He said," Sophia reported solemnly, "that you were the bravest person he has ever met." "Sophia," his voice was quiet, "you did say it." "I said something like it." "Same thing." She turned back to Natalie, utterly unintimidated. He also said, "We are going to take care of you now." Sophia, what? You said it twice. Natalie looked at Vincenzo Rinaldi, this man, whose name lowered voices in rooms she would never be invited into, who had 6 men outside her hospital door, who had sat in a hallway for 4 hours because a woman he had never met had put herself between a bullet and his daughter. He met her eyes, and for just a moment, the precision and the control and the careful authority fell entirely away, and what was underneath it was something much simpler and much more human. "Thank you," it said. "I don't know what to do with you, but I am not going to let anything happen to you, not now, not ever again." He didn't say any of that. He didn't have to. "Okay," Natalie said quietly. To Sophia, but not only to Sophia. "Okay." Sophia squeezed her hand. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent, relentless, vast. It did not know that in room 412 something had shifted. A door had opened that no one had planned for in a wall that everyone assumed was solid. It did not know that the man in the hallway who had built his entire life on the certainty that nothing came without cost, without agenda, without a hidden price, was standing very still for the first time in a very long time, with no idea what happened next. And finding to his own considerable surprise that he was not afraid of that. She was discharged on a Thursday. No one asked her how she was getting home. No one needed to. When the nurse wheeled her to the front entrance of the hospital policy, no exceptions, even for women who had taken a bullet and clearly felt ridiculous sitting in a wheelchair. There was a black car idling at the curb, not a taxi, not a ride share. A car that cost more than some people's annual salaries, with a driver who got out the moment he saw her and opened the rear door without being asked. Natalie looked at the car. She looked at the driver. She looked back at Paula, who had come to collect her personal items from the room and was now standing slightly behind her with the expression of someone watching a friend step onto a boat they're not entirely sure is seaworthy. "I can call a cab," Natalie said. "Mr. Rinaldi anticipated you would say that," the driver said. He was somewhere in his 50s, square-jawed, with the kind of face that had made peace with itself a long time ago. "He asked me to tell you that you are, of course, free to do whatever you wish. He also asked me to tell you that if you take a name, he will simply have someone follow the cab to make sure you arrive safely, and he felt that might feel more intrusive than the alternative." Paula made a sound behind her that was not quite a laugh. Natalie looked at the open car door. "That's not a choice. That's a velvet trap." "Those were more or less his exact words when he described it to me," the driver said. There was something very carefully neutral in his expression that she suspected was covering amusement. "My name is Carlo. I've worked for Mr. Rinaldi for 19 years. I'm a very safe driver." She got in the car. The ride to her apartment took 22 minutes. Carlo did not attempt conversation, which she appreciated. He drove the way the very best drivers do, smoothly, almost invisibly, as if the car were simply moving through the city of its own accord, and he was merely along for the observation. She sat in the back and watched the city move past the window and tried to organize her thoughts into something manageable. It did not go well. She kept returning to the same image, not the lobby, not the man with the dark coat, not the floor, but Sophia's face in the hospital room. Those enormous, serious eyes. The careful, deliberate way she had taken Natalie's hand like a decision she had made and intended to keep. "We are going to take care of you now." Natalie pressed her fingers against the window glass. It was cold. She focused on that. When Carlo pulled up to her building, he came around and opened her door, and then, before she could take more than a step toward the entrance, said quietly, "Miss Voss." She turned. "For what it's worth," he said, and for the first time something personal moved across that composed face, something genuine and unguarded. "In 19 years, I have never seen him sit in a hospital hallway for 4 hours. Not for anyone." He paused. "I thought you should know that." She didn't know what to say to that. So she said nothing and went inside and stood in her apartment for a long time without taking her coat off. The space felt different. She wasn't sure why. Nothing had changed, same furniture, same light, same quiet. That was a little too complete. But something had shifted in her relationship to it, some subtle thing, as if the room were the same and she were not. She had almost died in a dance academy lobby on a Tuesday morning. She had held a little girl's hand on a cold tile floor. A man she had never met had sat outside her hospital room for 4 hours. And she did not. She realized, standing in her coat in her too quiet apartment, she did not feel afraid. She felt something much stranger than afraid. She felt seen. That terrified her more than the bullet had. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number which she almost didn't answer. Then something, instinct or curiosity or both, made her pick up. Miss Voss. His voice. Low, precise, the slight Italian rounding of certain syllables. I wanted to ensure Carlo delivered you safely. He did. She sat down on the arm of her couch. You have a lot of people delivering things on your behalf. I'm more effective at distance. A beat. How is the pain manageable? The doctor said you should not be alone for the first 48 hours. The doctor told you that. A pause. He may have been more forthcoming with information than is strictly standard practice. May have been. Natalie absorbed this. Mr. Rinaldi. Vincenzo. The correction was quiet and immediate. Not a request exactly, more like a clarification of terms. She started over. Vincenzo, I appreciate everything. The hospital, the car, the all of it. But I want to be clear with you. I don't need to be managed. I'm not managing you. You had my discharge paperwork reviewed before I left. Paula told me. A silence, then, I wanted to ensure the instructions were correct. That's managing. That's being thorough. Another pause, and she had the sense of a man who was choosing words with unusual care. Miss Voss, Natalie, I understand the distinction you're drawing. I am not in the habit of overstepping, but you were shot protecting my daughter. And I am, again, he stopped. Started again. I am not good at doing nothing. It is not something I have ever learned to do. She was quiet for a moment. Outside her window, a bus went past. How is she? Natalie asked. The question shifted something in the tone of the call, subtle but immediate, like a key change. She is better now that you have left the hospital, he said, and there was something in his voice that was not pride exactly, but in the same neighborhood. She was considerably less manageable while you were still admitted. She wanted to eat every meal in your room. That sounds like her. She also informed me this morning that I should send you flowers. Red ones specifically because, and I am quoting directly, white ones look like you're sorry, and red ones look like you mean it. Natalie laughed. It surprised her, the laugh, the ease of it, the way it moved through her like something thawing. She's not wrong, she said. No, he said. She rarely is. A pause. There will be flowers on your counter, I should warn you. She turned. On the kitchen counter, which had been empty when she left for the hospital 4 days ago, there was a vase of red roses. A lot of them. She stared at them. When did Carlo has a key from your building manager? I apologize for the presumption. I will have it returned immediately if you prefer. You had my building manager hand over a key to your driver. Yes. Without asking me. You were unconscious at the time. A beat. I recognize that does not fully address the ethical dimension. She stood up and walked to the counter and touched one of the roses. Red exactly as Sophia had specified. Fresh. No, she said, it doesn't. Another beat. But thank you for the flowers. She could not see him, but she had the distinct impression that on the other end of the phone, Vincenzo Rinaldi was allowing himself something very small and very private that might in other circumstances have been a smile. Sophia would like to visit you, he said. When you're ready, there is no pressure. Tell her Thursday, Natalie said. She can come Thursday. She will count the hours. Tell her not to count them out loud, or she'll drive you insane. This time she was certain. The pause had warmth in it. Good night, Miss Voss. Natalie, she said a beat. Good night, Natalie. The call ended. She stood in her kitchen with red roses on the counter, and her coat still on, and her side aching, and her heart doing something entirely unauthorized. She told it to stop. It did not listen. She had the feeling, quiet, certain, arriving without drama, that things had just become considerably more complicated. She was right. She just didn't know yet how completely she was right. Sophia came on Thursday with a drawing she'd done herself, Natalie, in a ballet pose, rendered in crayon, with the careful ambition of a child who wanted very badly to get it right and had almost succeeded. She presented it solemnly, both hands the way you present something important. The knee is wrong, Sophia said, pointing at it critically. I know. I tried 4 times. Knees are hard. It's perfect, Natalie said. It's not, but thank you. Sophia sat down in the chair beside the couch with the compact efficiency of someone used to making herself at home in formal spaces. How is your side getting better? Does it hurt when you breathe deep? A little. The doctor told Papa it would do that for about 2 weeks. Papa wrote it down. She said this last part with a tone that suggested writing things down was a deeply characteristic Vincenzo behavior. He writes things down, everything. He has notebooks, a lot of notebooks. Sophia tilted her head. He wrote down what you said, in the hospital, about just being a scared little kid. Natalie looked at her. He told you that. I heard him tell Marco. She paused, not remotely apologetic about having listened. Marco is his. I don't know exactly what Marco is. He does a lot of things. Papa says he's indispensable. Marco says he's underpaid. She delivered this with the deadpan confidence of someone repeating a joke she has heard many times and found consistently amusing. Natalie smiled. I like the sound of Marco. Everyone likes Marco. That's what makes him good at his job. Sophia looked at her hands for a moment, then back up. Are you scared still about what happened? The directness of it landed clean the way Sophia's questions always did. Sometimes, Natalie said. At night mostly. Sophia nodded seriously. Me too. Papa sits with me until I fall asleep. He thinks I don't know he stays the whole night sometimes, in the chair by my door. She paused. I know. Does it help? Yes. Simple. True, then quietly, I wish I could do that for you, since you don't have anyone. Natalie's throat did what it had been doing with increasing frequency since a certain 7-year-old had come into her life. I'm okay, she said. I have you, don't I? Sophia considered this with appropriate gravity. Yes, she said at last, but you know, she stayed for 2 hours. She talked about her lessons she'd been working with a different instructor, while Natalie was recovering a woman named Miss Peters, who was technically excellent and personally about as warm as a parking structure. She talked about a book she was reading, a chapter book about a girl who solves mysteries, which she felt was realistic except for the part where the girl's parents were completely uninvolved. Real parents pay attention, Sophia said, or real guardians. She talked about the apartment. She liked the window in the living room. She liked the plant on the shelf. She did not understand why Natalie had so many shoes for a person who mostly wore one pair. And then at the end, when Carlo was texting that he was downstairs, she stood up and straightened her jacket and said very matter-of-factly, Papa wants to have dinner. When you're better. He wants to say thank you properly. He doesn't know how to say it without doing something, so he's going to cook. He cooks. He's very good. He learned from his mother. A pause. He doesn't let many people see that side of him. The cooking. She said it carefully like she was handing Natalie something breakable. Just so you know, Natalie looked at her for a long moment. Okay, she said. Sophia's face did the thing it did when she was pleased but maintaining composure. Okay. She picked up her bag. Rest your side. Don't reach for high shelves. I read the post-op instructions online. You read my post-op instructions. Knowledge is useful. She was already at the door. I'll see you Thursday. You just came on Thursday. Next Thursday, then. She opened the door, paused, looked back with those ancient brown eyes. I'm glad you're not dead, Natalie. The door closed. Natalie sat in the quiet for a long time. Then she picked up Sophia's drawing and put it on the refrigerator door with a magnet right in the center where she would see it every morning. The dinner happened 10 days later on a Sunday evening in the penthouse apartment on the 31st floor of a building that occupied an entire city block on the lakeshore. Carlo collected her at 7. He did not comment on her dress or the fact that she had changed 3 times before settling on it. He drove in his customary smooth silence and held the elevator door and delivered her to a foyer that was larger than her living room, and then with a small nod, disappeared. Vincenzo was in the kitchen when she found him, which was not where she had expected him to be. She had expected him at a table composed behind glass, the formal version of the man she had met in the hospital. What she found instead was a man in a dark sweater, with his sleeves pushed to his elbows, standing over a stovetop with complete unhurried focus like a different person entirely. He looked up when she came in. Something moved through his expression, quick, warm, held carefully in check. "You found it," he said. Carlo gave very precise directions. He is a very precise man. He gestured to the counter. "Sit. It's 20 minutes more." She sat on a stool at the kitchen island and watched him cook, which she had not expected to do, and which was, she found, a surprisingly intimate thing. He moved in the kitchen the way she had once moved on a stage, not performing, not showing off, just occupying the space with complete ease. He talked while he cooked, low and unhurried, about the sauce, his mother's recipe, 40 years old, which he had called her every year until she died to make sure he still had it right. "Did you?" Natalie asked. "Have it right?" She said, "Almost. Every year, almost." A pause. "She died 3 years ago. Now I have no way of knowing if I ever got there." He said it without drama, just fact with a quiet ache under it. "I have decided that almost is enough." Sophia appeared from the hallway in her pajamas, which Natalie suspected was a strategic choice, because nobody tells a child in pajamas to go back to bed during an important dinner conversation. She installed herself on the stool beside Natalie with the satisfaction of someone who has executed a plan successfully. "You're supposed to be asleep," Vincenzo said, not turning around. "I was reading. At 9 o'clock. The chapter was long." She looked at Natalie. "You look nice." "Thank you. You look very strategically casual." Sophia's mouth curved. "I don't know what that means." "Yes, you do." Vincenzo turned from the stove. He looked at them, his daughter and this woman sitting side by side at his kitchen counter, easy with each other, the way they had apparently been from the very beginning. And something happened on his face that came and went so fast Natalie almost missed it. Something that looked like it had been away for a long time and was uncertain whether it was allowed back. He set a small bowl of bread on the counter between them. 15 more minutes, he said. "And you too, Sophia. Eat 2 pieces and then bed." 3, 2, 2.5. That is not how bread works. It could be. Natalie pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. They ate at a table by the window. The city spread out below them, all light in motion. Vincenzo served and sat across from her, and for a while there was Sophia's commentary, which covered the food, a theory she had about why pasta shapes taste different, even if they were the same sauce, and a detailed account of a disagreement she'd had with Miss Peters about the correct execution of a releve. Then Sophia was sent with minimal, but ultimately successful persuasion, to bed, and they were alone. The shift was subtle but total. The buffer was gone. They sat across from each other with wine and the remains of dinner and the city below them, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "She talks about you constantly," Vincenzo said. "Since the first day. She came home and told me that her new teacher moved like water and had sad eyes." Sad eyes. Her exact words. He looked at his glass. "She's right, usually, about people." "She's remarkable," Natalie said. "You've done something extraordinary with her." "I have done my best." A pause. "I am not always sure my best is the right kind." He looked up at her with a directness that she was beginning to recognize as characteristic, the thing he did when he'd decided to say something true. "The world I operate in it is not a safe world, Natalie. You know that now." "I do." "She has security she doesn't fully understand yet. She has restrictions. There are things she can't do that other children do without thinking." He set his glass down. "I watch her sometimes and I wonder if I have taken something from her by keeping her close to me, by keeping her in my world." "She doesn't seem diminished by it," Natalie said carefully. "No, something like pride complicated by grief. She seems more than I expected, more than I deserve probably." "That's a very heavy thing to carry," Natalie said. "The feeling that you don't deserve the good things." He looked at her. Quiet. "You know it too." It wasn't a question. She held his gaze. "I know it too," she said. The city hummed below them. Somewhere in a back bedroom, a 7-year-old who had selected red roses and staged a pajama intervention was probably still reading her chapter book, listening. "I need to tell you something," Vincenzo said. His voice had changed slightly, just slightly, but enough. "About the shooting." Natalie went still. "We know who sent him." His hands were flat on the table, very still. "The man in the lobby. This was not random. He was sent, specifically, by someone who knew Sophia's schedule, someone who knew which days she was at the academy, someone who knew, oh, he stopped. The muscle in his jaw moved. Someone who had access to information that should not have been accessible. An inside source, Natalie said. Yes, she thought of Corinne, of that office, of that flicker behind the composed eyes when Natalie had asked what she should know about Sophia. How many people knew her schedule, she asked. He watched her face carefully. Few, very few. A pause that was heavy with something unspoken, including the woman who hired you. The sentence landed. Natalie sat with it. She thought of Madame Corinne's silver chignon and expensive perfume and the way she had said discretion is not optional here. She thought of Paula's anxious pen clicking. She thought of the man in the dark coat and the way his eyes had moved, not searching, not uncertain. Directed, like someone who had been given coordinates. You think Corinne told someone Sophia's schedule? Natalie said. I think, Vincenzo said carefully, that Madame Corinne has significant financial difficulties that she has been concealing for approximately 2 years. I think certain parties offered her a solution to those difficulties. And I think the price of that solution was information. He paused. I think you were never supposed to be in that lobby. But I was. But you were. Something moved in his face. Dark controlled the edge of something that had a lot of pressure behind it. And because you were Sophia is alive. He looked at her across the table with an honesty that was so unguarded, so stripped of performance that it changed the dimensions of the room. I owe you a debt I have no currency to repay, and I am also, he stopped, picked the next words with visible care. I am also deeply unacceptably angry that you were hurt, that you are the one who paid for her betrayal. You were an innocent person in the wrong place. I was in the right place, Natalie said, for Sophia. He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly, you were. Outside the city continued its indifferent revolution, a million lives proceeding on their separate tracks, none of them knowing that in a penthouse on the 31st floor, something was being built between two people who had started the month as strangers, assembled out of red roses and crayon drawings, and the particular kind of trust that only forms when someone has already shown you who they are in the worst possible moment. Neither of them named it. It was too new and too fragile, and they were both in their different ways, people who had learned to be careful with fragile things. But it was there. And across the city in an office that smelled of expensive perfume, a woman with silver hair was making a phone call she believed was completely private. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a great many things, and the reckoning for all of them was already on its way. The call Natalie received the next morning was from a number she recognized immediately. Madame Corinne. She stared at the name on the screen for 4 full rings. Her thumb hovered. Her sides still ached when she breathed too deep. The red roses on her counter had started to open overnight, petals spreading wide and unguarded the way things do when they finally feel safe enough. She answered, Miss Voss. The voice was exactly as she remembered it, composed, cool, wearing its warmth like a piece of jewelry that didn't quite fit. I've been meaning to call. I heard about what happened. I was devastated. Were you? Natalie said, a brief pause. Of course. You are one of my best instructors. The thought of you being hurt on academy property. In the lobby, Natalie said. Not a class, not a rehearsal. The lobby after hours while I was waiting with a student whose schedule you were aware of. Another pause. Slightly longer. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Natalie kept her voice even deliberate, the way you hold a door steady against wind. I'm asking how you're doing, madame. It must have been a shock. It was. The warmth in the voice recalibrated, smoothed back into the register of concern. I wanted to let you know your position here is absolutely secure. Take all the time you need to recover. Sophia has been asking about you. I know, Natalie said. She visited me Thursday. A silence that lasted exactly 1 beat too long. How lovely, Corinne said, isn't it? Natalie looked at the roses. I'll be in touch about returning madame. Thank you for calling. She hung up. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up a different phone. The secondary one Vincenzo had sent over 2 days ago without explanation in a small box with a card that said, only use this for calls you want to keep private, and she sent one message. She called me this morning. She knows I've seen Sophia. The reply came in under a minute. I know. We're listening. Don't go back to the academy yet. I'll explain tonight. She put the phone down. She looked at the crayon drawing on her refrigerator, the almost right knee, the careful ambition of a child who kept trying until it was close enough. She thought about a woman in a silver chignon who had said discretion is not optional and had meant something entirely different by it than Natalie had understood at the time. She thought about how trust works, how it's built in small increments. A correction held a question answered honestly, a hand taken in a lobby, and how it's destroyed all at once in a single motion like a structure that holds and then doesn't. She wondered how long Corinne had been building toward that single motion. She was going to find out. Vincenzo explained it that evening over the phone methodically, the way he did everything, starting from the edges and working inward, laying out facts like a man arranging pieces on a board he had been studying for a long time. Corinne had debt, not the manageable kind, the catastrophic kind accumulated over 7 years of bad investments, a costly legal dispute over the building lease, and a lifestyle she had refused to scale back even as the ground beneath it eroded. She had borrowed from people she should not have borrowed from, and when those people came to collect, she had found herself without options except for one. The Ferretti family had been watching Vincenzo for 2 years. They were looking for leverage, and leverage in Vincenzo's world meant the people he loved. It meant Sophia. Someone had approached Corinne 8 months ago. The offer was simple: feed us the child's schedule, her routine, her movements. Tell us when she's vulnerable, and your debt disappears. She had said yes. She said yes, Natalie repeated, not a question, just the words held up to the light. She said yes, Vincenzo confirmed. His voice was controlled in the way that things under extreme pressure are controlled, not calm, but held. She let Sophia enroll in the academy because it gave her access to her routine. And then she assigned Sophia to you specifically because you were new. You didn't know the circles. You wouldn't recognize the signs. She used me, Natalie said. She used you, he said, as insulation. If something went wrong, if anyone looked too closely, you were the layer between her and the thing she'd done. A new instructor who knew nothing, expendable. The word landed with a particular weight. She didn't expect you to be in that lobby, he said, and something shifted in his voice, something that cost him. She expected Sophia to be alone. She expected it to be clean and fast and on. He stopped. She didn't account for you. And Natalie was quiet for a long moment. Does she know that you know? Not yet. A pause. That is where it gets delicate. How delicate? Delicate enough that I need to ask you something. And I need you to understand that you are under no obligation to say yes. None. Huinam, I need you to go back to the academy. The silence stretched. Not yet, he said quickly. Not tomorrow, when you're ready, when it looks natural. And when you go back, I need you to be normal. Completely normal. I need her to believe that you are simply returning to work, that you have no idea what she did, that you harbor no suspicion that you are exactly what she always thought you were. Because if she thinks she's safe, she'll keep talking to them. She'll keep the channel open, and we'll know everything. A pause. I need that channel open for exactly 10 more days. After that, I have enough. Enough for what? He was quiet for a moment in a way that told her the answer was complicated and that he was deciding how much of it to give her. Enough to end this, he said, permanently, in a way that holds. She understood without him spelling it out that permanently in his language covered territory she wasn't going to ask him to map for her. What she understood was this: Sophia would be safe. Corinne would not be able to do this to anyone else. And the Ferretti family would understand clearly that the account was closed. 10 days, she said. 10 days. And Sophia doesn't know any of this. Sophia knows nothing. His voice when he said it was a particular kind of tight. I need it to stay that way. Okay, Natalie said, I'll go back. Another silence, then quietly, Natalie, if you feel unsafe at any point you leave. You don't wait. You don't try to finish anything. You walk out and you call me, and I will have people there in 4 minutes. 4 minutes is quite specific. I have timed it. No humor, completely serious. 4 minutes. She looked at the roses, almost fully open now. I know, she said. I trust you. She felt through the phone the weight of those 3 words landing on the other end, the way he held them for a moment before he answered. Thank you, he said, and then quieter. Get some sleep. She went back on a Monday, 8 days after the dinner, 2 weeks and 3 days after the lobby. The academy looked exactly the same. It always looked the same. That was part of its identity, its deliberate insistence on permanence. The marble floor, the smell of rosin and perfume, Paula at the desk, Paula who looked up when Natalie walked in and whose face did something quick in complicated relief and guilt in something that looked like it had been waiting to confess. Natalie, she stood up. I'm so glad you look. I'm fine. Natalie kept her voice warm, ordinary. Getting there anyway. Is Madame in? She's in her office. Paula glanced at the door and then back and lowered her voice to something barely above a breath. She knows you're coming in today. She's been a hesitation. She's been very interested in how you're doing. I'm sure she has. Natalie met Paula's eyes and held them for just a moment. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement wordless and careful. Paula's pen was still. For the first time since Natalie had known her, the pen was completely still. She knocked on Corinne's door and walked in. Corinne was at her desk, and she stood when Natalie entered, a gesture Natalie had never seen from her before, a standing which was either warmth or calculation, or both. Natalie. She came around the desk, which was also new, and took both of Natalie's hands in hers. Her grip was firm, dry, measured. You look well. Better than I feared. I'm tougher than I look, apparently. Natalie smiled. Easy, natural. The performance of someone who had nothing to hide. Clearly. Corinne looked at her with those composed eyes, and Natalie felt the assessment happening, quick, professional, the same jeweler's gaze she'd turned on her at the interview. Looking for cracks, looking for something that didn't fit. Come sit down. I want to hear how you're really doing. They sat, they talked. Corinne was warm in a way she had never been before, the shooting, attentive, asking questions, leaning slightly forward. It was a convincing performance. Natalie recognized it as a performance because she was giving one too, and it takes one to know one. Halfway through, Corinne said lightly, carefully, I imagine you've seen quite a bit of the Rinaldi family during your recovery. A bit, Natalie said. Sophia visited a couple times. She's sweet. Yes, a measured beat. And her guardian, he sent a car to take me home from the hospital. A shrug. Very thoughtful. Corinne studied her. Nothing more than that. He's a busy man. Natalie tilted her head slightly. Why do you ask? No particular reason. Smooth, practiced. He can be a very intense presence. I wanted to make sure you weren't feeling any pressure. Not at all, Natalie said. He's been perfectly appropriate. Corinne nodded slowly. And Natalie watched something in her relax, a fractional loosening of the shoulders, a breath that came out just slightly longer than the breath before it. The posture of a woman who has confirmed what she needed to confirm. She thinks I don't know anything. She thinks I'm exactly what I was before. Natalie smiled and asked about the intermediate class. The 10 days had a specific texture to them. They were ordinary on the surface and entirely extraordinary underneath, like a river that looks calm because everything is happening below the waterline. She taught classes. She corrected technique. She signed attendance sheets. She had coffee with Paula, who had begun in tiny increments to let things slip, small things said almost accidentally, then quickly pulled back. A comment about a man who had come to meet Corinne last spring. A reference to a phone call she hadn't been supposed to hear. Nothing complete, nothing direct, but pieces assembling themselves. On the 6th day, Sophia came back to class. She walked in and stopped in the doorway when she saw Natalie, and her face did something entirely unguarded, joy and relief combined, washing through her like a wave before she composed herself and walked to the bar with studied calm. Natalie waited until the other students were warming up and then went to her. Hey, you, she said quietly. Hey. Sophia looked straight ahead at the mirror. Her jaw was doing the thing it did when she was holding something in. I missed this. I know. I missed you. I know that too. Sophia glanced at her sideways, quick, checking something. Are you okay, really? Really, Natalie said. And in this moment with this child, it was not a performance. I promise. Sophia nodded, once sharp, the nod of someone who has received a satisfactory report. Good, she said. and she went back to her warm-up with the focus of someone who has been waiting 2 weeks to apply it. On the 8th day, Natalie was leaving the studio after the last class when she heard Corinne's voice from the office speaking low, rapid, the words not quite audible. Natalie stopped in the hallway. She didn't move toward the door. She didn't need to. Vincenzo's people were already listening. She just stood for a moment listening to the rhythm of it, the cadence of a woman who thought she was invisible, who thought her actions had no witnesses, who had looked at a child and made a calculation and decided the math worked out in her favor, who had put Sophia's schedule in someone else's hands and told herself it wasn't her fault what those hands did with it. Natalie walked out of the building and called the private phone. "She's on the phone now," she said when Vincenzo picked up. "With someone." "I know, we have it." His voice was very quiet and very focused. "Natalie, I need you to listen to me carefully. After tomorrow's classes, I need you to not go back. Tomorrow is the last day. Tomorrow is the last day." A pause. "You've done everything I asked, more than I asked. I need you out of there before the next part." "The next part," she repeated. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Is anyone going to get hurt?" "No one who doesn't deserve it," he said. And then immediately, as if he'd heard himself, "Corinne will be confronted legally through channels that will hold. I have people who know how to make the right things visible to the right people." Another pause. "I am not going to do anything that would make you ashamed to know me, Natalie. I want you to know that." The sentence surprised her. The plainness of it. The fact that it mattered to him, that her opinion of him was something he had evidently been thinking about. "I know," she said, and she meant it. "Tomorrow," he said, "last day, and then you're out." She went home. She sat at her kitchen table with the private phone and the drawing on the refrigerator and the roses that were starting to drop their petals one by one onto the counter in small, soft collisions. She thought about Corinne, about a woman who had been extraordinary, once genuinely extraordinary, a dancer of real talent, a builder of something real, and who had arrived at a moment where she had to choose between her pride and her integrity and had chosen wrong. About how long it must have taken her to become the person who could make that choice. Whether there was a single moment when the math changed, or whether it had been gradual, imperceptible, the slow erosion of a thing she'd told herself was solid. She didn't feel sorry for her, but she felt something adjacent to sorrow, not for what Corinne had done, but for what she must have lost along the way to being able to do it. The next morning, she put on her coat and picked up her bag and went back one last time. It was a regular Tuesday. Cold bright, that same flat November light that cuts shadows hard against every surface. The intermediate class went well. Sophia's releve was finally clean, both sides consistent. The weeks of correction finally settled into muscle memory. Natalie watched her do it and felt the particular undiluted satisfaction of a teacher who has seen something click into place. At the end of class, Sophia lingered. She was doing that thing where she was obviously waiting for the other students to leave before she said something. When the room was empty, she said, "Something is happening, isn't it?" Natalie looked at her. "What do you mean, Kambayan?" "With Papa. He's been different. Quiet in a specific way, not a regular way." She watched Natalie's face with those ancient eyes. "And you came back to work very quickly for someone who got shot 2 weeks ago. I heal fast. Your side still hurts. I can see it when you turn." Natalie said nothing. "I'm not going to ask you to tell me," Sophia said. Careful, precise, 7 years old. "I know there are things I'm not supposed to know yet. Papa always says I'll understand when I'm older, and I always tell him I understand now, but I know what he means." She picked up her dance bag. "I just wanted you to know that I know something is happening, and that I'm not scared, because you're both here." Natalie crouched to her level. "You are the most extraordinary kid I have ever met in my life," she said. Sophia considered this. "I know," she said, not unkindly, "but thank you for saying it." She hugged Natalie quick, fierce, the way children hug when they mean it without wanting to make a scene of it, and walked out. Natalie stood in the empty studio for a moment. The mirrors gave her back her own reflection. A woman in a dance studio, one hand pressed lightly to her side, wearing an expression she couldn't quite categorize. She thought, "This is the last time I stand in this room." She thought, "I am not sad about that." She picked up her bag. She walked out through the lobby, past the bench where Sophia had sat with her dance bag, and her patient certainty that Marco was getting coffee. Past the front desk where Paula was typing something very carefully and did not look up but raised one hand in a brief private wave. Past the spot on the tile floor near the entrance where there was nothing now. No mark, no sign, the ordinary indifference of a surface that has been cleaned. And Natalie looked at it for just a moment. I was here, she thought, and it mattered. She walked out into the cold November air. Behind her in an office that smelled of expensive perfume, a silver-haired woman was having a conversation she believed was her last safe one. She was wrong. She had been wrong for a long time. And in approximately 18 hours, she was going to find out exactly how wrong, not from the men who had used her, not from the family whose trust she had sold, but from the woman she had dismissed as expendable, who had stood in a lobby and refused to be. Natalie didn't know that part yet. She would by morning. The call came at 6:47 in the morning. Natalie was awake already. She had been awake since 5, lying in the dark with her side aching, and her mind running through the same loop it had been running since she'd walked out of the academy the night before. She picked up on the first ring. "It's done," Vincenzo said. 2 words. But the weight behind them was enormous. Compressed, dense, like something that had been building for a very long time, finally releasing. "Done how?" she asked. "Corinne met with her contact last night, a man named Sutter, financial intermediary for the Ferretti family. We have the recording, we have the transaction records. We have everything." A pause. "My attorney filed this morning at 6. By noon, the relevant authorities will have a package that makes the picture impossible to ignore." And Corinne, a silence that had texture to it. "She doesn't know yet. She's at the academy right now. She arrived at 8, same as always." Another pause. "I need to ask you something." "Ask." "I want you to be there when I speak to her." Natalie sat up. Her side protested. She ignored it. "Why?" "Because she used you." His voice was even, but underneath it, something was burning at a low, steady heat. "She put you in that lobby. She made you the unknowing buffer between her decision and its consequences. And she has spent 2 weeks believing she got away with it, believing you are still just the expendable new instructor who took a bullet and understood nothing." He paused. "I want her to understand that she was wrong about that. I want her to see it from the person she underestimated." Natalie was quiet for a moment. She thought about Corinne's hands taking hers at the beginning of last week, that firm, dry measuring grip. The performance of concern from a woman who had made her a pawn without losing a night's sleep. "What time?" she said. 10 o'clock. I'll send Carlo." "I'll be ready." She was ready at 9:15. She sat at her kitchen table with coffee and the private phone and the drawing on the refrigerator and made herself breathe evenly. She was not afraid exactly. What she felt was more specific than fear, a coiled, focused readiness, the feeling she used to get in the wings before a performance. The knowledge that something was about to happen that could not be undone, and the decision made and held that it needed to happen anyway. Carlo arrived at 9:40. He opened the door, nodded once, and drove in his customary silence. Halfway there, he said without turning, "He's been up since 3. Working, thinking." A pause. "He thinks a great deal, Mr. Rinaldi. Most people mistake it for coldness. It isn't." "I know," Natalie said. Carlo glanced at her in the rearview mirror, a brief look, warm and considered. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Vincenzo was waiting outside the academy building with Marco, who turned out to be a compact, quick-eyed man in his late 30s with the look of someone who had seen everything and categorized most of it as manageable, and 2 other men Natalie didn't recognize, but whose posture told her everything she needed to know about their function. He looked at her when she got out of the car. His eyes moved over her face with a quick, careful attention. "How are you, doll?" "Ready," she said. Something settled in his expression. He gave a short nod. "We go in together. My attorney is already inside. He arrived 5 minutes ago. Corinne doesn't know he's there yet. Paula let him in." A beat. "Paula has been cooperative." "Paula has been trying to tell me for 2 weeks," Natalie said. "I know. She'll be protected. She's already given a statement." He looked at her for one more moment, that direct, searching look that she was beginning to know, and then he said quietly, only to her, "You don't have to say anything in there. You can just be present. That is enough." "I have things to say," Natalie said. A brief pause. "Of course you do." And there it was, that thing that happened at the corners of his expression when he was allowing something through. Not quite a smile, better than a smile. The acknowledgement of a person he had come to know. He held the door. She walked in first. The lobby of the Corinne Academy looked exactly as it always had. Paula was at the desk, very still, her pen untouched beside the keyboard. She looked at Natalie with eyes that were doing enormous amounts of work behind a composed surface, and Natalie gave her the smallest nod. It's okay. You did right. And Paula exhaled slowly and looked back at her screen. Vincenzo's attorney, a thin, precise man named Elliot, was standing near the hallway to Corinne's office with a leather document case and the expression of a man entirely at ease with delivering unwelcome information. He nodded at Vincenzo. She's in. Doors closed. Has she seen you? Not yet. Vincenzo looked at Marco. Marco looked at the door and then at the two other men, and then gave a small nod that seemed to organize the next several minutes without requiring words. Vincenzo turned to Natalie. Ready? Yes, she said. He knocked on Corinne's office door twice, authoritative, unhurried, and opened it without waiting for an answer. Corinne was at her desk. She looked up with the automatic composure of a woman who had spent 60 years perfecting the art of being unruffled, and for a fraction of a second, less than a second, a sliver of time, her face showed something pure and unguarded. Fear. It was gone immediately, papered over with the silver chignon precision and the composed gaze and the careful warmth she deployed like a tool. But Natalie had seen it, and she understood in that instant that some part of Corinne had been waiting for this, that the waiting had probably been the worst part. Mr. Rinaldi, she stood. Her eyes moved to Natalie and something shifted, a recalculation fast and visible. And Miss Voss, what an unexpected— Sit down, madam, Vincenzo said. Not loud, not aggressive, simply a sentence delivered with the quiet, absolute certainty of a man who has never in his life had to say something twice. Corinne sat. Elliot came in behind them and placed the document case on the corner of her desk with a precise, deliberate care that was its own kind of statement. Vincenzo took the chair across from her, not the visitor's chair off to the side, but the one directly across, the one that put them eye to eye. He sat with his hands folded and looked at her the way he told Natalie he looked at everything from the edges inward, laying out the picture until it was complete. I'm going to tell you what I know, he said, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next. And I would ask you not to perform for me because I have been listening to your performances for 10 days and I know every note of them, and we will simply get through this faster if you don't. Corinne's jaw tightened. The composure held, but it was working harder now. I don't know what you think, you 42 recorded conversations, Vincenzo said. The most recent one at 11:17 last night with a man named Sutter, who wires money through a shell account in the Caymans registered to a company called Meridian Consulting, which does not consult on anything. He paused. 18 months of transactions. The first payment made 9 days after Sophia enrolled in this academy. He let that sit for a moment. The enrollment that you arranged. The color in Corinne's face changed. Not dramatically, she was too controlled for dramatic, but it changed. You told them her schedule, Vincenzo continued, still in that same low, even tone. You told them her arrival times, her departure times, which days she had early classes, which days the lobby was understaffed. You gave them a map. He paused. And then, when they used that map to send a man with a gun into your building, you called your instructor in the hospital and asked her how she was doing. The room was absolutely silent. Natalie watched Corinne's face move through something, not remorse, not yet, maybe not ever, but something that looked like the collapse of a position she'd been holding for a long time. The exhaustion of a person who has been carrying a weight they told themselves wasn't that heavy, who has finally been made to set it down and look at it. I didn't know they would send someone, Corinne said. Her voice was smaller than Natalie had ever heard it. I was told it would be a private arrangement, that Sophia would be collected quietly. Collected, Vincenzo repeated. The single word repeated back was devastating in its flatness. I needed the money. I had exhausted every other. She stopped, pressed her lips together, looked at her desk. I made a mistake. You made a choice, Vincenzo said. For 18 months. Repeatedly. A mistake is once. You made a choice 18 months in a row. Corinne looked up then, and for the first time her eyes moved to Natalie, really moved to her, the way they hadn't since they'd walked in. And what Natalie saw in them was something she hadn't expected. Not defiance, not calculation, but something that looked almost like shame. The particular shame of being seen clearly by someone you dismissed. Natalie had told herself she would wait, that she would let Vincenzo handle it, that she would be present and silent and let the facts do the work. She had said she had things to say, and she had meant it. But standing here now in this office with its expensive perfume and its high ceilings and its perfect curated permanence, she found that what she had to say was simpler than she'd planned. You looked at Sophia, Natalie said, and you saw a transaction. Corinne flinched, slight physical involuntary. She came to you with brand new dance slippers and a sticker still on the sole, Natalie continued. And she told me on the first day that dancing was the only time she felt like she could just be somewhere. She's 7 years old. She lost her mother. She counts the minutes until her father comes home. Her voice was steady. She was slightly surprised by how steady it was. And you looked at her and you saw something you could sell. I didn't, Corinne began. I know you told yourself it wasn't your fault, that you were only providing information, that what they did with it wasn't your business. Natalie looked at her directly. I was on the floor of your lobby, madam. I had Sophia's hands on my arm and she was screaming. I know exactly what your information bought. The silence afterward was total. Corinne looked down at her desk. Her hands, Natalie noticed, were trembling. Very slightly, but trembling. Vincenzo let the silence hold for a moment longer. Then he reached across and opened Elliot's document case himself and removed a single sheet of paper which he placed in front of Corinne. This is a transfer of ownership, he said. The academy, the building lease, the name, the operating license, all assets. You'll sign it over today. Corinne looked at the paper. You can't, this is my life's work. Your life's work was built on a foundation that you chose to compromise, Vincenzo said. I am not taking it from you. You sold it. I am simply collecting what you sold. He paused. The alternative is that Elliot delivers his package to the federal building this afternoon instead of tomorrow. Your choice about which version of this you'd prefer. There's a federal, she stopped, looked at Elliot, who met her gaze with the unruffled patience of a man holding four aces. You've already spoken to them. We've opened a conversation, Elliot said pleasantly. The direction it goes from here depends somewhat on the next 15 minutes. Corinne looked at the paper. She looked at Vincenzo. She looked at Natalie one more time, that look of complicated collapsed shame, and then she looked back at the paper. She picked up a pen. Her hand was still trembling when she signed it. They were outside on the sidewalk when Natalie realized she was shaking. Not obviously, not visibly, probably, but inside in her chest and her hands a fine tremor that she hadn't felt during the meeting and was apparently feeling now that the meeting was over. The decompression of something that had been held very tight. Vincenzo was beside her. He noticed, of course he noticed, she was beginning to understand that very little got past him, and he said nothing, which was exactly right. He just stood next to her while Marco spoke quietly into a phone a few feet away, and Elliot emerged from the building with his document case and the sign transfer and the calm satisfaction of a man who has done a clean piece of work. After a moment, Vincenzo said very quietly, "You were extraordinary in there." I just said what was true. That's what made it extraordinary. He looked at her. She spent 60 years making people feel like they needed to prove themselves to her. You walked in there and made her prove herself to you without trying. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Is it over the Ferretti side of it? Largely. They will receive a communication today that makes the cost-benefit of any further interest in my family very clear. He said it simply without elaboration, and she understood that this was the part she didn't need the details of, and that he was respecting that boundary with the same care he applied to everything. Sophia is safe. That is, he stopped, looked away for a moment, then back. That is the only thing that has mattered throughout any of this. I know, Natalie said. I know you know. He looked at her with that direct, unguarded look, the one she'd seen first in a hospital room and had been seeing in increasing increments ever since. That's why it means something when you say it. Carlo had pulled the car around. Marco had finished his call. The machinery of Vincenzo's world was reassembling around its ordinary functioning, and Natalie was standing in the middle of it on a cold November sidewalk with her side aching and her hands not quite steady and something opening in her chest that she was going to have to find a name for eventually. "What happens to the academy?" she asked. "It stays open." He said it immediately as if the answer had been decided a long time ago. "The students don't lose their school. The instructors keep their positions. I'll have it run properly with management that can be trusted." A pause. "Paula has been offered the director of operations role. She said yes before I finished the sentence." Natalie laughed at that genuine surprise, the kind of laugh that comes out before you can decide whether to let it. Of course she did. She also said, and I am quoting, "Tell Natalie she can have her old class back anytime she wants it. And also I have been wanting to say things for 2 weeks and it feels incredible to have said them." That sounds exactly like Paula. It was very Paula. His expression was doing the thing again, that thing at the corners, warm and careful and present. "The offer is open, your position, if you want it." Natalie looked at the building, the stone facade, the high windows, the door that opened into a lobby with a cold tile floor, and a bench near the cubbies where a small girl had waited for a driver who was always 3 minutes late. She thought about what it had been before all of this, just a temporary solution to a temporary problem, just a place to pour the remnants of a life she was still grieving. She thought about what it was now. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." She looked at him. "For now," she said, carefully testing each word as she said it, "what I need is to go home and sleep for approximately 14 hours. Carlo will take you." "I know." She picked up her bag, paused. "Vincenzo." He looked at her. "Thank you for letting me be in that room." She held his gaze. "I needed to be there." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "That's why I asked." She got in the car. As Carlo pulled away from the curb, she looked back once through the rear window. Vincenzo was standing on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, watching the car. Not with possession or management or calculation. With something quieter and more personal. The look of a man watching something he values move away from him and trusting for the first time in a long time that it will come back. She faced forward. She thought about Sophia's voice in the lobby. "Papa, come, please come now." And the way she'd said it, stripped of all the composure she wore like armor, reduced to the oldest and most essential version of herself, a child who needed her person. She thought about Vincenzo sitting in a hospital hallway for 4 hours. She thought about red roses and crayon drawings and a recipe kept alive through 19 phone calls because almost is enough. She thought about a man who wrote things in notebooks, who couldn't learn to do nothing, who had spent his adult life in a world where no one acted without an angle, and who was currently standing on a sidewalk watching her car drive away with an expression that had no angle in it at all. She thought, "I have been invisible for a long time." She thought, "I don't think I am anymore." Her phone buzzed, the private one, a text from a number she now knew as well as her own. "Sophia is asking if you are coming for dinner Sunday." She smiled. She looked out the window at the city, moving past the ordinary and different, relentless city that had no idea what the last 3 weeks had contained. Then she typed back, "Tell her yes." 3 dots appeared. Then she says to tell you she's making dessert and that you should not have high expectations. And then a separate message, a beat later, "I'm making the rest. You won't be disappointed." She put the phone down in her lap. She looked at her own hands, steady now. Finally, the trembling gone. Outside Chicago moved past in its sharp November light, and all shadow and brightness, the way it always was this time of year, the way it had been on the morning everything changed. She thought about standing in the wings before a performance, that feeling of readiness before the thing that cannot be undone. She had spent 2 years believing that feeling was gone, that it belonged to the person she used to be, the one who could do things she could no longer do. She understood now that she'd been wrong about that. The curtain was rising, and this time she had no intention of watching it from the wings. Sunday came in cold and clear. The kind of November afternoon that feels like a held breath. The city paused between what it was and what it was about to become. Natalie arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine she'd spent 20 minutes choosing and a calm she didn't entirely trust. Carlo met her in the lobby, nodded with that particular warmth he'd developed over the past weeks, and delivered her to the elevator without ceremony. She rode up to the 31st floor and stood in front of the door for exactly 3 seconds before she knocked. Sophia opened it. She was wearing an apron that was far too large for her, dusted with what appeared to be powdered sugar, and she had the expression of someone who has been waiting at the door for a while and is pretending she wasn't. "You're 2 minutes early," Sophia said. "Is that a problem?" "No, I'm just noting it." She stepped back to let Natalie in, then looked at her with those assessing eyes. "You look different." "Different how he—" Sophia tilted her head. "Less sad," she said simply. And then before Natalie could respond to that, "Come see what I made. I need an honest opinion, and Papa won't give me one because he's being supportive." Being supportive is good. Being supportive is useless when you need to know if something actually tastes right. From the kitchen, Vincenzo's voice, "I heard that." "Good," Sophia called back, entirely unbothered. Natalie followed her into the kitchen. Vincenzo was at the stove sleeves, pushed up, the same unhurried focus she remembered from the first dinner. He looked up when she came in, and the thing happened in his expression, that quick, warm, carefully managed thing. And he said, "Good evening," in a voice that was trying to be ordinary and not completely succeeding. "Good evening," she said. Sophia thrust a spoon at her. "Taste this. It's panna cotta. Tell me the truth." Natalie tasted it. She thought about it seriously, the way Sophia deserved. "It needs a little more vanilla," she said, "but the texture is perfect. That's the hard part. You got the hard part." Sophia considered this, nodded once, and went back to her pot with the purposeful energy of someone who has received actionable intelligence. Vincenzo caught Natalie's eye over the top of Sophia's head, and the look between them was brief and complete, the look of two people who have developed a shared language without deciding to. 20 minutes, he said. "Sit." She sat. And she let herself fully and without the cautious reservation she'd been carrying since the hospital simply be in this kitchen with these people, the smell of something extraordinary on the stove, the sound of Sophia talking to her panna cotta under her breath, the particular quality of light and warmth that a kitchen has when the people in it are genuinely glad to be together. She had spent 2 years learning to live inside diminishment, inside the smaller version of everything, smaller apartment, smaller hopes, smaller sense of what she was allowed to want for herself. She had gotten good at it. She had told herself that getting good at it was the same as healing. She understood now that it wasn't. Dinner was the kind of meal that doesn't announce itself. No ceremony, no performance, just food that was genuinely extraordinary. Vincenzo's mother's pasta, a slow-braised something that had been cooking since that morning bread that he'd made himself, which Natalie found so unexpectedly charming that she almost said so out loud and then decided to save it. Sophia ate with focus and reported on her week in the organized, comprehensive way she reported on everything. Miss Peters had complimented her footwork, which she was pleased about, but trying not to show. She had finished the mystery novel and found the ending satisfying but predictable. She had a theory about why certain pasta shapes tasted different that she had now refined following up on the dinner 3 weeks ago, and she presented it with the seriousness of someone delivering a thesis. "She's been working on that theory for 3 weeks, Vincenzo said. "A theory should be thorough," Sophia said. "It should also eventually conclude." "It's concluded. I just told you the conclusion." She turned to Natalie. "Don't you think it's right?" "I think," Natalie said carefully, "that you have made a genuinely compelling argument and that I will never eat rigatoni the same way again." Sophia looked satisfied. Vincenzo looked at Natalie with an expression that was doing several things at once, and she looked back at him, and for a moment the table was very quiet in a way that had texture to it, a warm, specific quiet like a room where something true has been said out loud for the first time. Then Sophia looked between them and said with the tone of someone confirming a hypothesis, "You two like each other." "Sophia," Vincenzo said, "I'm not being rude, I'm observing." She picked up her fork. "It's obvious. It has been obvious for several weeks. I don't understand why adults make these things so complicated." "Because adults," Vincenzo said with patient precision, "understand that some things require time." "Time for what? You already know you like each other. What are you waiting for?" "Sophia." "I'm eating," she said innocently, and applied herself to her pasta. Natalie kept her eyes on her plate and said nothing, and felt the warmth in her face and did not try to make it stop. Across the table, she was fairly certain Vincenzo was experiencing something similar, though he was considerably better at not showing it. She heard him take a slow breath and return to his food with the deliberate calm of a man who has handled more difficult situations than his 7-year-old daughter and is choosing wisely not to engage. Later, after Sophia had presented her panna cotta, which was with the additional vanilla genuinely excellent, a fact that she received with glowing composure, and had been persuaded through a negotiation that lasted 11 minutes to go to bed, Natalie and Vincenzo sat at the cleared table with the last of the wine and the city below them, doing its usual vast and indifferent thing. The quiet between them was comfortable in a way it hadn't been at the first dinner. Less careful, less constructed. The quiet of two people who have been through something together and don't need to perform around the edges of it anymore. She's not wrong, Natalie said. He looked at her. Sophia, she's not wrong. Natalie held his gaze direct, deliberate, something decided. I'm not going to be the person who makes this complicated because complicated feels safer. I've been doing that for 2 years and I'm tired of it. Vincenzo was very still for a moment. Then he set down his glass with the precise, careful motion of a man making sure his hands were steady. I don't have a simple life, he said. I want you to know that. What you've seen over the past 3 weeks, the security, the risk, the things I can't always explain, that doesn't go away. That is the life. I know. And you're not afraid of it. I didn't say that. She looked at him steadily. I said I'm tired of making things complicated because I'm afraid. Those aren't the same. He looked at her for a long time. The city hummed. Somewhere down the hall, Sophia was almost certainly still awake reading her next chapter book with plausible deniability. I have been alone for a long time, he said. By design. I told myself it was safer. For Sophia, for the people around me. He paused. I think I told myself that so many times I started to believe the design was permanent. And now, he said, a woman I had never met threw herself in front of a bullet for my daughter, and 3 weeks later is sitting at my table telling me she's not going to make things complicated. Something shifted in his face fully openly, the whole controlled architecture of it coming on in one quiet motion. I find myself entirely without my usual arguments. Natalie reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face, and he turned his hand over and held hers deliberate, certain a decision made and meant. They stayed like that for a while with the city below them and the quiet around them and the knowledge shared and unspoken that something had just been confirmed that had been building since a cold tile floor and a small girl screaming and two people who had been each in their own way waiting to be found. The twist came 3 days later. Not a violent one, not a gunshot or a phone call at 6 in the morning. It came quietly in a manila envelope that arrived at Natalie's apartment by courier on a Wednesday afternoon, with her name handwritten on the front in a script she didn't recognize. Inside was a single document, a letter on Academy letterhead, and beneath the letter a set of transfer papers. She read them twice. Then she called Vincenzo. Did you do this? She asked. No. His voice was immediate alert. What is it? The Academy. The transfer papers. She looked at the document again, making sure she was reading it correctly. They're in my name, Vincenzo. The Academy has been transferred to me. A silence. That wasn't me, he said slowly. Elliot handled the transfer into a holding company. I haven't directed any secondary transfer. She heard him thinking that specific quality his silences had when he was working through something. There's a letter. Yes. Read it to me. She read it. It was brief, 2 paragraphs precise, and unornamented. It said that the Corinne Academy of Performing Arts was being transferred to Natalie Voss in recognition of a debt that could not otherwise be repaid. It said that an institution built on the talent and dedication of people like her deserved to be in the hands of someone who understood what it was for. It said, and this was the paragraph she'd read 3 times, that its author was aware that she had made mistakes that could not be undone, and that this was not an attempt to undo them, but an attempt, however inadequate, to ensure that something good came from them. It was signing Corinne Beaumont. The silence on the phone lasted a long time. She still had a secondary asset, Vincenzo said finally. A partial ownership stake in the building that wasn't included in what she signed over to me. It was hers to do with as she chose. Another pause. She chose this. Natalie sat with the letter in her hands. She thought about a woman in a silver chignon with expensive perfume and a life's work and a wrong decision that had compounded for 18 months. She thought about shame, the particular collapsing shame she'd seen in Corinne's face in that office, looking at Natalie and seeing clearly, maybe for the first time, what her choices had cost someone. Mum. She thought about what Paula had said once, clicking her pen about how Corinne had been different once. Younger, more generous before the fear of losing everything had slowly eaten the parts of her that were best. I don't know what to do with this, Natalie said. Yes, you do, Vincenzo said quietly. You already know. She did know. She'd known since she walked out of the academy on her last Tuesday and thought, this is the last time I stand in this room. I'm not sad about that. She'd been wrong, it turned out, about the last part. She was a little sad, not for Corinne. For the thing it had been before it became something else. For the students who hadn't known anything was wrong. For Sophia's first day with the sticker on her dance slipper sole and the way she'd said, it's the only time I feel like I can just be somewhere. I'm going to keep it open, she said, run it properly. I know. With Paula. Obviously. And I want a studio, a real one, not just class as a training program for kids who can't afford the fees. She was thinking out loud now, the thoughts arriving faster than she'd expected, as if they'd been waiting. I spent 12 years in a world that only had room for people who could pay for it. There are kids out there who can do what Sophia can do who will never get the chance because nobody opens the door. Then open the door, Vincenzo said. It was simple, complete. The voice of a man who, when he decided something was right, did not waste time around the edges of it. I'll need help. Funding infrastructure. You have it, Vincenzo. You have it, he said again, and the certainty in it was not the certainty of a man offering charity. It was the certainty of a man investing in something he believes in. Whatever it needs, whatever you need. She pressed the letter flat on her kitchen table with her palm. The paper was heavy cream-colored, the Academy's crest embossed at the top. She thought about all the things it had meant at different points in the last month opportunity, threat stage set for a betrayal scene of a confrontation, and now this, a beginning. Okay, she said. Okay. She told Sophia on Saturday. They were at the kitchen island in the penthouse, Sophia doing homework with the concentrated diligence she brought to everything academic, Natalie at the counter with coffee and the comfortable ease of someone who had stopped calculating whether she was allowed to be somewhere and had simply started being there. I'm going to run the academy, Natalie said. Sophia looked up. I know. You knew. Papa told me yesterday. She said it with the absolute unperturbed calm of someone receiving information that confirmed what they had already worked out. He said you'd probably tell me today because you'd want to tell me yourself and that I should act surprised if I wanted to, but I'm not very good at acting. No, Natalie agreed. You're really not. I think it's a waste of energy to pretend things are different from what they are. She returned to her homework for a moment. Then without looking up, I'm glad you're staying. Me too, Natalie said. Sophia put her pencil down, looked at Natalie directly the way she always did when she had something real to say. Before you came to the academy, Papa worked all the time. Not different from now, but there was nothing else. Just work and taking care of me and making sure everything was safe. She paused, choosing words with the care she always used when something mattered. He laughed at dinner last Sunday. Actually laughed. He doesn't do that very often. Natalie kept her voice even. What was funny? Your face when I said the pasta shape theory. A flicker, that controlled, elegant flicker that was Sophia's version of a grin. He thought it was funny that you were taking it seriously. It's a serious theory. I know. That's what made it funny. She picked up her pencil again. I just wanted you to know that it matters, you being here, not just for me. She looked back at her paper. For him, too. Natalie looked at this child, this extraordinary, ancient-eyed, deeply serious child who had come into a dance studio in brand new slippers and changed the entire direction of her life, and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 2 years. Something finding the place it was supposed to be in and staying there. Sophia, she said. Thank you for letting me be yours too. Sophia looked up, and for once she did not compose herself, did not manage the expression into something neutral and contained. She just looked at Natalie with her whole face open and said very quietly, "You already were. From the first day. I just didn't know how to tell you." Natalie reached over and squeezed her hand. Sophia squeezed back firm, deliberate, a decision held. Then she picked up her pencil and went back to her homework because she was 7 years old and had fractions to finish, and the world continued at its ordinary pace around a moment that was anything but ordinary. Vincenzo found Natalie on the balcony an hour later. She was looking at the city, not with the detached observation of someone watching something that doesn't include them, but with the engaged present attention of someone who has recently been reminded that they are part of things, that the city knows their name in a sense, that they have walked its streets and taken its bullets, Mondes sat at its tables and held its people's hands, and that makes it in the way that matters theirs. He came and stood beside her, close but not crowding, the way he always was present without pressing. "She finished her homework?" he asked. "Almost. She got stuck on fractions." She always gets stuck on fractions. She thinks they're philosophically suspicious. "She told me." She said any number that isn't whole is trying to tell you something important about the world, and we should pay more attention. He was quiet for a moment. "That sounds exactly right to me, actually." "Me too." They stood side by side with the city below them in the cold air in the early dark of November, pressing in at the edges. His arm was against hers, not quite touching close enough that she was aware of every millimeter of the distance. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was a direct question, the kind he asked when he had decided something deserved a straight answer. She thought about it seriously, the way it deserved. "I think," she said slowly, "I am becoming happy, which is different from being happy and better than pretending to be, and it's the most I've been able to say about myself in 2 years." She looked at him. "Is that enough for you?" He held her gaze. "It is everything," he said simply. She turned back to the city. He moved a small, deliberate shift, and his arm was against hers, now fully the warmth of it real and solid, and stayed. She did not move away. She let herself have it, the simple, enormous thing, being beside someone who had chosen to be beside her. "She's going to drive us insane," Natalie said. "You know that. Running the academy and being here, she's going to have opinions about everything. The curriculum, the recital schedule, the pasta served at the studio potlucks. She already has opinions about the recital schedule. She submitted a written proposal last week. She's 7. She said, and I quote, 7 is old enough to identify institutional inefficiencies." He paused. "I am not going to tell her she's wrong." Natalie laughed full and real, the laugh that had been coming more easily lately, arriving without announcement, the way good things do when you stop bracing for them to be taken away. He laughed too, quietly, the way he did everything but genuinely from somewhere real. And the city below them hummed on, carrying its millions of ordinary, extraordinary lives through another November evening. Indifferent as always to the specific and tremendous fact that on a balcony, on the 31st floor, two people who had each spent a long time being careful about what they allowed themselves were standing shoulder to shoulder in the cold, laughing at the same thing, and neither of them was counting the cost of it. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in February, the Corinne Academy reopened its doors under a new name, the Voss Academy of Performing Arts. Paula had ordered a sign that was, in Natalie's opinion, slightly too large. Paula had defended this choice on the grounds that large signs communicated institutional confidence, and Natalie had conceded the point because Paula was, it turned out, an extraordinarily good director of operations and was right about most things. The new scholarship program enrolled its first 12 students that day. 12 children between 5 and 12 from 6 different neighborhoods, brought in by parents who had received letters in January explaining that the program existed, that it was free, that it was real, and that someone had decided that talent should not be a function of zip code. Natalie taught the first class herself. She stood at the front of the studio with 12 pairs of eyes on her, some nervous, some eager, some doing the careful measuring thing that she recognized from another pair of brown eyes on another first day, and she said what she always said at the start. "My name is Natalie. I used to dance professionally, and I can't do that anymore because I got hurt. But I'm still a dancer. I just do it differently now." She looked at them. "That's the first thing I want you to understand. Things don't stop being what they are just because they change. Dancing is something you are, not something you do. We're going to find out what that means for each of you, Chum. She paused. Now, has everyone got their shoes on? Yes, good. In the back of the studio, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and the expression of a senior advisor observing a satisfactory operation, Sophia watched. Beside her, Vincenzo had come in quietly halfway through Natalie's introduction. He stood next to his daughter and watched the woman at the front of the room move through the space with that quality she'd had from the first moment he'd seen her, not performing, not showing off, just occupying the space with complete and unassuming ease. The quality of someone who had finally fully come home to themselves. She's good, Sophia said quietly. Yes, he said. She's going to change those kids' lives. Yes. Sophia looked up at him. Are you happy, Papa? He was quiet for a moment, the real kind of quiet, the kind that means the question is being taken seriously. Then he looked at her, and the expression on his face was one she had not seen before, or not quite like this, open and settled and entirely without armor. Yes, he said, I am. Sophia nodded once, satisfied the nod of Sofbun, who has been monitoring a situation and received the conclusive data she was waiting for. She looked back at the studio. Good, she said simply. It was taking forever. He put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him, which she didn't always do anymore. She was 7.5, and had opinions about being treated like a little kid. But she did now, and he held her, and they watched Natalie lead 12 children through their first steps in a studio that had been broken and remade and given new purpose by people who had each, in their own way, refused to stay down. Some stories end with a dramatic final note, a confrontation, a revelation, a door closing on the past. This one ended with something quieter and better. A woman at the front of a room doing what she was made to do, and a man at the back of the room watching her with the full, unhurried attention of someone who intends to keep watching for a very long time. And between them, a 7-year-old girl with ancient eyes and a theory about pasta shapes and the absolute unshakable certainty that love is not complicated, that it is in fact the simplest thing in the world, and that the only thing required is the courage to stop pretending it isn't there. Natalie had taken a bullet for a child she barely knew. She had walked back into the fire because it was right. She had stood in a room full of power and said what was true. And in doing all of it, she had found her way back to the only thing that had ever mattered. Not the stage, not the career, not the version of herself she'd been mourning for 2 years, but this, being present, being necessary, being fully and finally seen. The city outside hummed its ordinary hum. The class continued. The children watched her move and began slowly to move like her, finding the thing inside them that had been waiting for permission. And Natalie Voss, 34 years old, dance teacher, survivor. The woman who had stepped in front of a bullet, not out of bravery, but out of the simple and stubborn refusal to let a child be alone in her fear. Natalie Voss looked at those 12 faces and felt clean and complete, and without reservation, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not almost, not nearly, not getting there. There.